All right, let's get right into it. India's goods and services tax, GST, is on the verge of its biggest shakeup since it first launched. And we're not talking about a small tweak here. This is a massive overhaul that's going to directly impact what you pay for, well, pretty much everything.
So the government is pitching these huge reforms as a Diwali gift to the nation, and it's all set to roll out around September 22nd. The whole idea is to put more money back in your pocket and get people spending again. But what does this really mean for your wallet and for the economy as a whole? Let's break it all down.
To really get what's happening now, we've got to look back a little. Before 2017, the tax system in India was, well, it was a mess. A crazy puzzle of 17 different taxes. Then came July 1st, 2017, and GST 1.0, with that big promise of one nation, one tax. And now, come September 22nd, 2025, we're stepping into a brand new era, GST 2.0. So here's what we're going to cover in this explainer. We'll look at the brand new tax slabs, figure out who the winners and losers are, dig into why this reform is even happening, check out the wider economic impact, and finally ask the big question, is this all just a calculated gamble? Okay, first things first, let's talk about the absolute heart of this reform, a major simplification of the tax slabs. The whole system is getting a facelift to make it way more straightforward and, frankly, easier for all of us to understand. And wow, when you see the old and new structures side by side, the difference is just night and day. We are moving away from that complicated system with 4 different slabs, plus something called a cess, which is basically an extra tax on top of a tax. Now it's a much cleaner setup. The 12% and 28% slabs, gone. We're left with 2 main rates, 5% and 18%. Plus, we get a 0% rate for essential items and a new 40% rate for luxury and sin goods. The big takeaway here is one word: simplicity. All right, so this is the part you've probably been waiting for. How does all this actually affect our bank accounts? Because with tax rates shifting this much, some things are about to get cheaper, while a few others, well, they're going to get a bit more expensive. First, the really good news. A whole bunch of big-ticket items are getting a major price cut, dropping from that high 28% slab all the way down to 18%. We're talking small cars, popular motorcycles, which is fantastic news for middle-class families. But it also includes things like air conditioners, TVs, and even cement. So both a new car and building a new home could become a lot more affordable.
And the savings don't stop there. This is where you'll really feel it in your day-to-day life. A huge list of items and services is dropping down to the lowest 5% tax bracket. This covers your everyday essentials, soap, shampoo, toothpaste, but also services like going to the gym or staying in an affordable hotel. Crucially, this also includes most medicines and vital farm equipment like tractors. This is a really broad change aimed at boosting household savings.
Now this is a real game changer. Several key things are becoming completely tax-free, moving to that 0% slab. This includes food staples like packaged paneer and roti, but here's the big one. Individual health and life insurance premiums are now going to be tax-free. That is huge. Same goes for 33 life-saving drugs and basic school supplies for your kids. So who's going to be paying more? This is where the new 40% special rate comes into play, and it's reserved for what the government calls luxury and sin goods. Think large cars, powerful motorcycles, tobacco products, and sugary drinks. It also hits super high-end stuff like yachts and private jets, and even online gambling. The logic is pretty straightforward. Tax discretionary spending and things that are potentially harmful at a much higher rate. Okay, so we've covered the what, but the big question is why? Why make such a massive change right at this moment? Well, the answer really lies in the current state of the economy. And here's the core problem the government is trying to solve. Private consumption, which is just a fancy way of saying how much we the people are spending, still hasn't bounced back to where it was headed before the pandemic. Demand has been pretty sluggish, and that really acts as a brake on overall economic growth. The government's strategy here is to kickstart what economists call a virtuous cycle. Think of it like setting off a positive chain reaction. It starts with cutting taxes, which makes things cheaper. That gives all of us more buying power, which hopefully leads to higher demand. To meet that new demand, companies start producing more. That encourages them to invest and hire more people, which ultimately fuels a stronger, self-sustaining economy. That's the goal anyway.
But you might be wondering, why cut GST instead of just cutting our income taxes? Well, the answer lies in a concept called the fiscal multiplier. It's basically about getting the biggest bang for your buck. A study found that reducing GST actually has a more powerful ripple effect on the economy. For every rupee the government gives up in GST, it expects to get more than a rupee of economic growth in return, making it a super efficient tool for the job. All right, let's zoom out a bit now and look at the bigger picture, because a reform on this scale isn't just about cheaper TVs. It has huge implications for the entire economy, and it comes with both potential rewards and some pretty big risks. So, what's the price tag for all of this? A whopping 48,000 crore rupees. That's the estimated hit to the government's revenue. But they aren't looking at it as a loss. Instead, it's being framed as a strategic investment, a calculated cost to fire up the engines of the economy. And it seems industry leaders are largely on board with this thinking. Take this quote from Rajesh Jujurikar over at Mahindra & Mahindra. He calls it a landmark rationalization and fully expects it to boost demand and drive growth not just for his sector, but across the entire economic ecosystem. And you can see how this is expected to ripple out. The auto industry is hoping for a big boost in sales of smaller vehicles. Consumer goods companies are banking on us buying more packaged foods and personal care items. In healthcare, it could mean lower costs and more people finally getting insured. And for our farmers, cheaper equipment directly translates to lower costs. So what's the final takeaway from all this? When you strip everything else away, GST 2.0 is really one thing: a bold and very calculated gamble on the Indian consumer. The promise here, if it all works out, is threefold. For consumers like you and me, it means lower prices and more money in our pockets. For businesses, it means a simpler tax system and lower costs. And for the economy as a whole, it's a bet on sparking growth, led by consumption and bringing more businesses into the formal economy. Which brings us to the final critical question. The goal is absolutely clear: boost spending, accelerate growth. But the path forward is anything but certain. Will this massive bet on the Indian consumer actually pay off? And will it be the fuel that India needs to reach its ambitious dream of becoming a $5 trillion economy? I guess only time will tell.